feel my mind making the argument like, well, it can't just be that. Like you, that's too, like, it's too simple. That's too plain. Like, or then also like the mind making an argument like, well, what if you just fuck up your brain?
Those are
I'm like, it's
those
probably
are
gonna be
those,
right.
you're illuminating the most common fear barriers,
Hmm.
the most
Hmm.
common, the last ditch effort of the mind to be like, wait, hold the fuck up, man. We're
Hmm.
gonna lose it here.
Welcome to another Best Friend episode of Wild Satsang and with the Homies.
With longtime UT boys, Chris Staler and Luke Arndt.
Come along as we veer off the direct path to caress some toads, cuddle some cacti, pop a couple dung wieners, and just shoot the shit celebrating the beautiful dream of duality.
No time to waste. Literally, there is actually no time.
But yet, adventure awaits.
Let's dance with the stars and ride the waves of infinity.
Hey, we
On
skiing.
the slopes.
We're on the slopes. Oh, what? What is this?
I don't know. I think that's me.
He's still a fox. What? Oh no! How do you change? Like you were talking about how you feel compelled to like serve humanity in some way.
Mhm.
Like that just is what feels most genuine for you, and I definitely feel the same way. And I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that. But I did start making these videos on non-duality and like my personal experience and direct experience of like our authentic shared nature. Like I've had some very clear experiences um that have changed my perspective forever of just like equanimity with everything.
Hmm.
Like as soon as I talk about it, everything, like there's just like a low hum in which everything just is one self.
Hmm.
It's very hard to explain, but I've been enjoying speaking from that place and uploading these little videos to YouTube. It's pretty fun, and it's actually cool that there's like a community engagement too. Like where I'm building like a little community. Like people are actually posting questions and like engaging with the content, and it's pretty cool because there's so few people that are able to hold those types of conversations that like even though it's virtual, it's nice to find them online.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. And that's
Yeah.
cool that you're getting people interested or
Yeah,
like interacting with it all.
it's interesting because people like when people touch this space, have even a glimpse into like a non-dual experience, even if it's for a short while, all of a sudden it becomes almost all you want to talk about because it's like
Mm.
such a powerful experience happens thereafter. Like the thing that becomes most notable or most noticed is the actual consciousness that's aware within the experience. It's like feel everything as the substance of your own consciousness. Like when I feel this table, like where the brain mind used to think just project this table as like, oh, this is like how a table feels as a separate
Hmm.
object. Now it literally feels to me that like when I'm feeling this table, I'm rubbing on this table, this is the texture of consciousness. Like this is how
Mm.
consciousness feels. you
Mm.
know like, and when I like taste something, like that's one of the infinite ways in which consciousness tastes. And like it's a very interesting experience, and it happened in like different blips almost uh like I'd have a experience of non-duality, and it it like sometimes it would happen during meditation, but oftentimes it would come completely unprovoked. Like I would just be like walking, and then all of a sudden it would just be like consciousness walking within consciousness. It would be
Mm.
like
Hmm.
consciousness's direct recognition of itself in the moment, in which like I'm not there, like Chris isn't there, but somehow the aware presence of me is there to witness everything, not as like a stand apart witness, but as like a fully integrated aspect of consciousness that's
Hmm.
somehow aware within that moment.
Hmm.
And so like speaking about that is like again, it's going back to like speaking about the ineffable, but somehow and for some reason speaking of the ineffable has been such a source of profound joy for me that like I can't not, like
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
it's just a spontaneous like compulsion to uh record a direct insight, you know
Mhm.
for some reason it's
I
like it feels like consciousness wants to record itself in those moments, and it's like I'm just like, oh, there.
I mean, I would imagine that if consciousness is expressing itself in all of these varieties of different form, it would want to be recorded too. It's like, why not?
Yeah, dude,
Everything else.
it's just another like layer of interesting complexity within like infinite intelligence or like infinite beingness, to record itself. And it's almost like it's then looking at itself twice in that moment,
Is the absolute a narcissist?
I mean, it's the only thing that exists. So yes, like, yeah, I mean, yeah, the absolutely is a narcissist. Like, it's clearly the only thing that is. So it
Yeah,
couldn't not be. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
that's funny.
I've been meaning to ask you a question, um, around like around your or so like
You
I
look
have a
like a
couple
child at a
questions.
table, by the way. It's just
You
your
know,
head.
I'm like a child at the adult table.
Right.
So I got a question. Um, just get closer. Hit my growth spurt. Yeah. Um, but I have a couple questions actually. Um, One, do you think your personal regular practice has led to these spontaneous moments of oneness that just like happen
Yeah,
regularly?
yeah, it's very interesting because I can say both yes and no, and I can argue from
Hmm.
both. However, and it's also interesting because like when I hear like one of the old form gurus like talk about it, oftentimes they say, or actually this is more common probably in like the Neo Advaita, that they say you have absolutely no control over when it happens, and if it happens, it happens. Consciousness realizes itself, and you are not an active doer. You're not a player in the game. Somehow it just happens. And although that is what it feels like, also what it feels like is the more time, even though time is absolutely not a thing, and that's clearly seen in this space. Uh, Time for some reason is important in the sense that the more time you seem to bask in the pure radiance of just pure consciousness or pure being without the all the layers on top of it of identity and uh conceptual living, um it seems like it quickens the process. It does feel like that.
Hmm.
It feels like it's almost like this analogy has been used before, like the fruit ripens, and the fruit. It's true that the fruit will drop on it when it's sufficiently ripe. Yes, but it
Hmm.
also feels that like you can quicken the ripening process by exposing it to more of the pure light, that fruit to more
Hmm.
of the pure light. And so it does feel like in thoughtless meditation or just sitting in basking or abiding in pure consciousness, it does feel like that quickens the process. And
Hmm.
I've had a lot of experiences that I can speak to that seem correlated to me sitting in that space. Most recent kind of like blips into a non-dual experience, um, which it's not really a blip anymore. Like anytime I recall it, it's just direct experience. It's right here. But it used to come in blips, and this was not that long ago. This happened. Pretty much most of this happened like the actual abidance. The blips happened before Jake died, but like the
Hmm.
abidance has happened more since Jake died, and I think it was a frustration of with life that kind of tipped me over the edge, um,
Hmm.
related to Jake's death. But last blip before it became an abidance. I felt like that consciousness that was like, it felt like I was going towards like a vortex or a funnel in my consciousness, and the consciousness was looking at the vortex or the absolute from all perspectives. Like it was being sucked down a water drain, and it was like going into like a funnel, and as it was like circling it, it was looking at it from all perspectives, like literally infinite perspectives, like looking at the absolute with all these different adjectives, and like perspectives of consciousness. And that was in direct relation to a meditation, an intentional meditation, and an intentional period of self-inquiry. Oftentimes, like, the self-inquiry wasn't even like, who am I, which is a very common form of self-inquiry. It's like a very cutting and good sharp knife sort of inquiry. But the inquiry that I was doing immediately prior to this, just like me popping into like this vortex feeling, was, what is this? So I was actually walking around at work. I was walking around, and I was just walking through. I remember seeing this yucca tree, and I was like, what is this? Like me recognizing that everything is just consciousness, but I was like, what is this? Like, and like, what is this experience? And I was just like getting all the way down, and that's when like nothingness appeared. Like nothingness just appeared somehow, like not as anything, but like it's more like everything else disappeared, but like vision and sensation were still there, but there was just almost like nothing that could be said about it. It was just the isness. It was just like the pure beingness, or what is, you know. As I was walking, looking at this yucca, that's when I like swirled around nothingness and blipped into the absolute. Yeah. So I mean, that was a really long way to answer that question. But yes, it seems related. It definitely seems related, even though a lot of people that have had these same experiences say it's completely unrelated. Like I know, like Tony Parsons, one of the guys I've been reading, and also Jim Newman, those Neo-Advaita folks, they're one of the main ones that say there's nothing you can do. There's no being. You're like, it is what it is. It either happens or it doesn't, and there's no doer. Consciousness realizes itself through you when it's ready. And although I can argue from that perspective too, like that also seems true. This other thing that I have direct experience with, I can't be denied, you know.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that story, and I'm curious because I've like the times that I've felt, I don't know if I've had an experience that direct with absolute.
Yeah, like that non-dual.
Yeah, but I've had moments where I hear something, or it's mostly like in communication. Yeah. The reason I bring it up is because, meditation in my experience helps me surrender to what is, and then I'm more creative and working with what is and accepting everything that is. And I think it helps me. My small self is inexplicably connected to everything around me. And a lot of the times that I'm like meditating, like noting, like a noting practice, like just noting, surrendering to everything that is in this moment. Like I'm sitting here and I'm like noting, like I want one every second, like, all right, I'm feeling this pressure on my leg. I'm hearing that noise over there, I'm smelling, I can smell that. And then it just becomes eventually removing the labels and just being so present in the moment that I'm just aware of everything that's happening internally and externally,
Yeah.
But I've never had like what you describe to me sounds like like a complete transcendence of small self,
Yes.
And I'm just in inquiry with words really gets my mind in like a very upset state. Like it just like the more I use words, the more in terms of my like like spiritual practice, the what to do in those practices of mine. Um
Can I speak to this?
but yeah, sure.
Self-inquiry really is just a vehicle, like a vehicle to put you into that mind space where the mind cannot provide an answer. Like
Mhm.
really you're trying to get to that space where the mind is so in an uproar
Mhm.
because it's almost like the mind meets you at the doorway to the absolute or to like true
Mhm.
just beingness and is like stop, and it's just like
Mhm.
causing as much chaos and everything as it possibly can, causing as much ruckus to gain your attention so that you don't walk through the door. But like when the mind is most aggravated, like that is, you found the door. Like like
Mhm.
that you
Mhm.
know it's stand that aggravation is standing right at
Mhm.
the doorway, and you just need to
Mhm.
go through into that space where like the mind will calm down, and like in that space the mind absolutely cannot say anything. And so I'm sure you've had experiences where the mind just has no answers, and like you're just in that space where you're like it can feel uncomfortable because it's not something you're used to, because the mind is still kind of like interpreting it as like an unfamiliar and uncomfortable circumstance. But
Mhm.
if you can really melt into that, like abide in it and like take out and stop looking so hard through like a sense of identity, all of a sudden you'll find yourself just in the isness of the present moment, and like
Mhm.
the everything within the present moment is a refraction of your own light of consciousness. It's
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
interesting, and that's the non-dual experience. And
Well, and I feel like I'm curious. I want to ask what kind of questions you use in self inquiry, but also I want to like I I feel like I could piss my mind off, like and like upset it until the point where it like surrenders. And then there's also been times in like qigong or other meditation practice or even spiritual practice, group practices where it's like calming the minds down so much, but still being alert that it like surrenders. Like it would to me it would make sense that you could go both ways, but I want to like become more familiar too with like inquiry. Yeah.
yeah, alertness is key, which is part of the
Hmm.
reason that like uh I don't like smoke marijuana or anything like that. Like uh when I'm interested in just purely abiding,
Hmm.
because it almost just dulls everything down. Like marijuana
Hmm.
is great for just like cruising in an experience, but like it's like there's an alertness that's necessary when you're actually trying to walk through the door of self and no self. And um I will say the sense gates are those doors too. Like you were
Hmm.
mentioning those
The
sounds.
noting practice.
Yeah, like you
Yeah.
were mentioning like sound. And what's interesting is like the more you inquire about sound, like what is this? Where is this? The where is this one is interesting because like when you immediately ask where is this, like for example, I hear my dogs out there right now and I'm asking where is that? Like the mind will say it's out there, but really it's in your consciousness, right? like
Hmm.
like everything that you hear is in your consciousness. And so is there any separation between you and the sound?
Hmm.
Could there be? If you're hearing it, is there any separation between you and the sound?
Well, and that's like no, because every sense, both inward sense and outward sense is the result of your nervous system processing stuff, you know, and then at a broad scale, everything in this world is connected.
You're still looking
And
through a materialistic
yeah,
concept.
yeah.
Like you've already turned away from the door. Like the next step actually, like from where I was talking about,
Hmm.
is realizing that actually it's not in your consciousness. That's still a concept.
Mhm.
Really, all that's happening is just sound. The only
Mhm.
thing
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
it's just sound. Like it's not even that it's happening in my consciousness. It's not that it's part of even consciousness. That's even a
Mhm.
concept. You
Mhm.
just allow there to just be the sound, and then that's all there is. And the
Mhm.
more you can melt into that
Mhm.
place where there's
Mhm.
no self, there's no hearer, it's not even a substance. It's just nothingness arising as somethingness. It's really all that
Yeah,
can be said about it.
that that reminds me of a prompt with a listening exercise of like, does it take any effort to hear? And no, because it's just happening.
Right.
Ooh. I
You can
had
do this
little
with,
blips. I had little
yeah,
blips of totally disappear. As you were like saying, like there's just sound. It's like these things are a concept. There's only just sound. I had blips, like little flickers, where my sense of self as Luke was like flickering out of existence, and there was emptiness. That was
yeah.
fucking cool.
See,
Holy
there
shit.
is correlation. There is correlation, and I
Shit.
love pointing to it.
Mhm.
I love like speak because it's not. It's the closest thing there is to you. It's all there is. But
Mhm.
the veil is so thin. But somehow we all live on this side of the veil. But it's so thin. It's not. It actually
Mhm.
doesn't exist at all. Like when you see through it,
Mhm.
you're almost dumbfounded as to how you ever saw it differently.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you could do this with all sense gates, like vision is probably
Mhm.
one of the hardest ones to do it with, but also one of the most fruitful because it's like what you experience most of the time. So there's
Mhm.
also like more conceptual layers built upon your vision that are hard to dismantle. But it's the same process. It's like, okay, what am I seeing? Is what I'm seeing out there separate from me? Like when I touch my computer here, is this me touching something outside of me? And then the next step from there is, okay, well, obviously it's happening in my consciousness. Like, sure, you can go through, okay, like there's a neuroelectric impulse going from my fingers into following all these neurons up into the neurons in my
Mhm.
brain. And that's all true. But that's all a play of consciousness. That's how consciousness works. That in
Mhm.
this app, and as far as this apparatus goes. So all of that is still happening in consciousness, right? Like,
Mhm.
yes, that is truly how it works if you want to explain it through the lens of biology. However, if you want to explain it, what's actually happening in your direct experience, which is what we're talking about, like if you want to wake up, you have to look into your direct experience, your immediate and direct experience. Okay, if we're going to do vision, okay, me touching this computer is happening within my consciousness, right? Like, how could it not be? Like, I'm feeling the texture, I'm seeing this computer, it's within my consciousness. And then the next step from there, without doing any sort of explanation or mental gymnastics, it's okay, what's actually seeing? Or actually, is there, it's just sight. Like if there's no
Mhm.
concepts, like if I'm not going to adopt any concepts in this moment, what's actually happening? And it's just sight. It's just a seeing. Like it's just an illumination of a picture. And to even say that like that illumination of this space is happening through a me, that's already a concept. So if you
Mhm.
just sit in that space where it's just
Mhm.
sight, there's just sight.
This this reminds me of a practice, or it was like a simple one where it was like, I think it was Sam Harris. He was like, pretend like you have no head.
Hmm. That's a great one.
And that,
I've never heard that, but yeah, because I mean, if you pretend like you have no head, all of a sudden that releases a whole bunch of filters. Like already,
yeah,
you're not looking through your eyes, right? Because there's no head. You're not thinking
there's
through
just
your
sight.
right,
Hmm.
right. You're not thinking through your brain. because there's no head. There's just sight. Somehow there's just sight.
This is I really appreciate you sharing this. And this has been great because this, like, there's been times where my outer and inner experience it's totally fine. Like, there's just thought that's coming up, and then there's just the experience. But I'm getting the smallest little sight is harder, but like I'm getting little blips of that pure, simple, just experience. It's just experience itself.
Yeah. Yeah, thought is a good one too. Like thought is like the Sam Harris thing, like you said. Like if you think of thought with no head, think of it without a head. Okay, where's it happening? It's not happening in your mind anymore. It's not happening in a brain. It's just happening, is arising in a space as an element of the space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and somehow like aware aliveness is just an integral ingredient of existence itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all
Mm-hmm.
there is. Like thought,
Mm-hmm.
the thoughts that arise, they're just happening in consciousness. Not your consciousness, just consciousness.
They're just happening.
And then all of a sudden you take that next step. Exactly. They're
Mm-hmm.
just happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This feels great because, like, heading into this, I was thinking about, like, it's like it all can fit in it. It can all fit in it.
Everything fits in it.
Mm-hmm.
Existence fits in it. Everything that exists fits in it. Like there's no parameters to it. This is
Mm-hmm.
like the boundaryless experience
Mm-hmm.
for nobody. Like it's not like there isn't like an experiencer of boundarylessness.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like what is. And that's the non-dual experience with no experiencer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what existence is. Like that's how
Mm-hmm.
cool this is. Like existence has those properties.
Mm-hmm.
Properties of awareness, properties of aliveness, properties of infinite potentiality and creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow one of the fundamental qualities of this space is just a peace. There's just peace, and there's love for all of it, not because of anything. It's just what arises. It's just what's
Mm-hmm.
still there when everything else falls away.
Mm-hmm. I don't have any words.
That's perfect. That's perfect. I intentionally allowed that lot because that's it. That's it. People need to be willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like what you just did, people that's the door. That's the doorway.
Mm-hmm.
And like people will convince themselves that that's not it. But I promise you that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And like it might not hit you, and you might not like automatically realize and forever abide thereafter. But the more you visit that space, the more the parameters melt.
So I know that I've touched this before in a handful of times, but never really intentionally, you know?
Yes.
And also too, even in this, like memories of like ceremonies and stuff pop up, and it's clear how it aids in the allowing of that too. And there's things, and so like what I'm saying is, like, in that moment of silence that we both sat in, there's times in ceremony where there's a lot of sound and prayer, a lot of action, and then there's times, um, we're in a totally different dimension. There's music and people vomiting or crying or screaming, whatever. And then there's moments where there's just pure silence. and how much my mind would freak out at that silence,
Yeah.
needing to fill it, you know? But then eventually getting used to it and curious, and like how the silence can be refreshing, and just basically surrendering to the moment over and over, and surrendering to that, like to not needing to know anything. And also, I don't know, I'm processing a
No,
lot
those
right
are
now.
perfect words. Those are perfect words because you know as well as anybody that's been in a ceremony, surrendering is key. Like
Hmm.
letting go is key. And
Hmm.
what's really interesting is when you really merge with this way of being, that that silence pervades all chaos.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
that
It's
silence
the
is
foundation.
right. It's the substance of the chaos
Hmm.
is silence, is
Hmm.
peace, is just beingness. It's just what's happening. It's just what's arising. And there's no problems with it.
No. Well, in the past, I think my thoughts would, as they arise, would get in the way of the experience, or like trap me into something, but then continuously surrendering to just that thoughts are arising, not even having to think that, but just allowing the thoughts to arise while in that space. There's no problem.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like the thoughts can happen, and that's
And they
fine.
just
That's
happen.
great. That's what happens. You
Yeah.
know, like it's
That's
just,
just
that's just like,
that's just what the absolute is doing for nobody. They're just happenings arising.
and at the same time, I can feel my mind making the argument like, well, it can't just be that. You know, like you, that's too, like, it's too simple. That's too plain. Like, or then also like the mind making an argument like, well, what if you just fuck up your brain doing that all the time?
Yep. Those are
I'm like, it's
those
probably
are
gonna be
though
right.
you're illuminating the most common fear barriers.
Hmm.
The most
Hmm.
common, the last ditch effort of the mind to be like, wait, hold the
Hmm.
fuck up, man. We're
Hmm.
gonna lose it here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. That doesn't happen. Only peace
No.
happens. You realize what was animating the psycho mind all along, and then it becomes
Hmm.
your best friend. Like whenever it starts
Hmm.
talking again, you're like, yeah, that's it. It's just what's arising,
Hmm.
just like everything else, out of pure nothingness, out of pure potentiality, and out of
Hmm.
pure bliss, and it's still just all that.
Hmm. Wow. Hmm. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, and also, yeah, taking me through the example inquiries.
I mean, as you could tell from like the goofy ass videos I upload, it just comes out.
Hmm.
It's just
Hmm.
like what's arising
Hmm.
through like through through this. The this that isn't the this. It's funny like I'm still kind of developing the language for it, but like and like when I say the this that isn't a this, like that is not a fucking sentence. But like if you've ever been there, you fucking know. Like we were talking about earlier,
Hmm.
you know what that means.
Hmm.